Okay.
Recording
All right,
in
I'm gonna let
progress.
people in.
All right.
There's only
I'll be
two.
right back.
All right.
Gonna get some coffee, but nobody's messaged yet.
Richard. So nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Mark, I don't know you, but welcome.
Hi, we connected on Instagram, not Instagram, I'm sorry, LinkedIn a few days ago.
Oh my gosh. Well, hello and welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I think I mentioned to you that I've known Cleo for a long time, and I was working on a book on Black men and mental health.
Oh my gosh, you look so much younger. For some reason, I thought, given like all the experience you talked about, you're going to be this old guy and you look a lot younger. So I apologize.
I'm 61 years young.
Goodness gracious me. Wowie. Well, it's really nice to meet you. And this is David,
It's my pleasure.
who's not only
David.
my partner in life and crime and all kinds of things, but he's also the tech guy for today. He's going to be in and out. And he's also the bouncer in case somebody comes in who's giving us problems. He said, doesn't he look scary? Richard is putting on bouncer.
How you doing? Good morning, gentlemen. Where are you at, Jill?
I was just going to ask you the same thing. I am in Oakland.
I'm in New York City. I'm in Harlem.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so it's 11:59 in the morning.
Oh, look,
I
Betty
used to
walked
live
us.
on 83rd Street, and then I lived on 76th Street.
Really? Okay,
Couple
you know,
miles
I'm on
south.
109th between Columbus and Amsterdam.
Oh, okay. So I lived on 76 between Columbus and Amsterdam. Yeah.
Right, not too far away. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Richard, I know where you're from. Because I talk to you every week. I have to set up another meeting with you. Can you remind me and tell us where you're here
Yeah, I
from?
live in San Jose, south of San Francisco.
Right. Betty Walker, my LinkedIn friend. Welcome. It's nice to see you. Nice to see you in person. Well, as close to in person as some of us get these days. I'm going to go incognito for one moment while I text Cleo, and I'll be right back.
Love that shirt in your photo, Mark.
I'm back. We're going to give it a couple more minutes. Betty, do you want to tell us where you're calling in from?
Were you
Hi,
asking?
good morning. I'm calling from Manassas, Virginia.
Oh, wow. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer. Patty Dye. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Likewise. Patty, you want to tell folks where you're calling in from?
Did you say Patty? I wasn't able to hear you. Yeah, I'm near Asheville, North Carolina.
Welcome. Betty's here from Virginia. Naomi. Jennifer, do you want to tell us where you're calling from?
Good morning, everybody. I'm calling from Aloni Land, Oakland, California.
Same with me. Welcome back, David. Naomi, Barbara. Naomi, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us where you're calling from?
Sure, thank you. Hi, it's afternoon where I am. I'm calling from Brooklyn, New York.
Welcome. We just had two New Yorkers bond over how close they lived, though, at different times. Barbara, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us where you're here from?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Barbara Roscoe Graff. I am coming to you from the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles.
Welcome, Barbara. Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you again.
You too.
Cleo Manago, the man of the hour. You're on mute. I know you're saying something.
Technology. Hello, everyone. Am I off mute now?
You were off mute. We can hear you.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to be doing while Jill is hosting and making everybody feel wonderful is bring a little light to my topic. The lights are low and I want to make a little bit more light in here. So I need about 30 seconds. Is that fine, Jill?
Yeah, you're fairly well lit right now, at least from my perspective. Joe, welcome from the other side of the ocean. You want to tell us where you're calling in from?
Yeah, hi, I'm coming from London.
Wow, welcome. I'm always so impressed when we can make times coordinate enough to actually connect.
Good.
David, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
About everything. What was that?
I asked if David wanted to introduce himself as well.
Hello, I'm calling from this rainy treehouse in Nobi, which is the cute name for North Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, Aloni Land. Hello. I'm a former
Hello.
New Yorker. I've been told by my New Yorker friends that I've been out of New York for so long that I have to give up my New Yorker card, ID card. So I can no longer say I'm a New Yorker, I think.
You can take the New Yorker out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the former New Yorker, I say. Is there anyone else who joined who has not had a chance to introduce themselves and would like to?
Hi, this is Marla Hill from Atlanta.
Hi, Marla.
Glad to be here.
Really glad you're here. I recognize you from Facebook. I think we've had
Welcome.
a number of interactions.
Yeah, and on LinkedIn. Yeah.
That's what I meant. I meant LinkedIn. I did not.
Yeah.
I know Facebook came out of my mouth, but that wasn't the thought in my head. Well,
And that's okay.
So more people may be joining us, but without further ado, as I say, I want to introduce Cleo Manago. I'm not supposed to say doctor, but he didn't need a PhD for all of the amazing ideas that he has had throughout his life and all the things that he's done. I met Cleo, oh my gosh, around 1993. And the very first day we met, we had a 3-hour conversation that night and my world opened up. I did not know what I did not know. And I've been following him around on and off over the years ever since, and listening and talking. And last year we finished our first cohort of the 22nd Century Leaders program. This year it's for white anti-racists only, basically. We're changing it up in so many ways. I'll talk more about that later, but I'm just so delighted. Cleo Manago has founded the AMASSI centers, which are often emulated centers for Black health and wellness. He has created frameworks for critical thinking and cultural affirmation that were recognized by the CDC in 2015. as being beneficial for people of African descent. He founded Black Men's Exchange and Black Women's Exchange and so many other things that it would take a long time to name. He's one of the most profoundly influential thinkers around issues affecting people of African descent. And for me, therefore, for all of us, because that's so much woven into that body of thought, so much affecting who all of us are, including people of other descent. So Cleo, I want to let you add anything you want and jump in.
Well, sure. First of all, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Because some of these internet connections are not necessarily reliable at all times. Jill said it's true. I'm just here to engage you all around the topic for the afternoon. And instead of going any further regarding me, I'll just mention that I consider Jill a very important ally, a particularly humane person who has a lot of magical gifts and capacity to see past, I'll use a non-doctoral term and say BS, past BS, and see the real deal. And I really appreciate her investment in making society more humane and more open, and that be more equity and safety for everyone. Typically do not work with communities outside of the Black community. And that's a choice I made some years ago. And I've been exclusively focused on people of African descent for some time. I decided to stretch a little bit in response to a request from Jill, also because there seemed to be some interest in real transformation instead of superficial transformation, and real change instead of white dissociation from their role in white supremacy after the George Floyd murder and the high profile it got. So inspired by both of those phenomena, I decided to do it was primarily with people of African descent, stretch, and I am stretching.
Hey, Cleo, thank you. Can you encapsulate what you just said? Because you broke up a little bit there. I know what you said because I know what you say, but I'm not sure everybody caught all of that.
That's why I asked if I was clear.
You were, but then it got fuzzy
now?
again. A little bit fuzzy and some of the.
Okay, what I'm going to do at some point is change my connection, but I want to not disengage right now. But if you remember anything that I said that they didn't hear that they might have missed, you can interpret it if you like, Jill.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't want to. Okay, I can do that. So Cleo has chosen for most of his life to work exclusively within communities of African descent. That's where the need has been the greatest, and that's where he felt drawn and can do the most good. He doesn't typically work. Oh, Eileen, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. I apologize. You saw I was following and tracking, picking up what you were putting down. So maybe I should just ask if there are others who didn't hear everything besides me. Live transcription. Enable. Thank you. And with the following the George Floyd murder, he witnessed a possibility for white people to do more than simply dissociating from white supremacy-based actions, which is different from the past. And it was around that time that I asked him, gathered up all my chutzpah, fully aware that Cleo might not want to be bothered with working with white people because there's so much work to do within the Black community. I gathered up all my chutzpah and asked him if he would work with me, and to my great and delighted surprise and shock, he said yes. And I think David remembers I was giddy for like 3 days. Oh my God, Cleo wants to work with me. So this is an unusual foray, and I know that it is a stretch, and I'm deeply appreciative. We don't know, how many more times, how long Cleo is going to be available for this. So I think we're really lucky to have the opportunity, not just to be with him today, but to, if you're considering the possibility of joining our program. It's such a amazing thing for me and others who've been in this space with him to be able to experience his perspectives, which to me kind of strip away so much of the illusions and do it with a lot of love and a lot of heart. So, this isn't Ask Me Anything, so I wonder if any of you, I know some of you have messaged me with some thoughts for Cleo, and I want to just open, Cleo, if there's anything else you want to say, or if we just open it up.
Can I go ahead?
Well, have
And,
we?
Oh, wait, one thing, Eileen, I did not offer you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and anybody else that I might have missed. If you want to say who you are and where you're here from, please do.
Sure. Okay. My name is Eileen O'Brien. I just came in from running, so no one wants to see that right now. But but I tried to catch you. I just got tagged on a LinkedIn post about this session, so I don't know much about it. But I'm always looking to learn more about doing anti-racist work in the community, and so I look forward to hearing what the discussion is today. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. And did you say where you were calling in from?
I'm in Virginia.
Oh, I think somebody else said they were in Virginia too. Welcome.
Jill, did everyone already articulate why they came to this session?
No.
Well, can we do that real quick? Get the juices flowing. This will include everyone. So just start. All right, Alfred.
Yeah, I just want to say hello to everyone and thanks, Jill, for putting this together. And Cleo, thank you for your time. I'm Alfred Ramirez. I'm here in East Moline, Illinois. I'm Chicano, Mexican descent, born in East LA. I'm here because I do work in this space. I JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging work. And the work, I don't find the work as much as it finds me, just living every day, breathing and walking the streets. So I'm here to hear of your knowledge and to hear what you create in this room. I think that's the most powerful thing you offer us just from the few minutes with you. Thank you.
Welcome, Senora Ramirez.
I'm Barbara. I came today because I am embarking very imminently to co-facilitate a JEDI group in my synagogue. And I just want to stay immersed in this space so that I can keep learning and stay open and do the best job that I can in that realm.
Thank you.
Patty says, I'm here to listen
Joe
and learn.
Flex
I've
says
heard about.
likewise. Go on, Jill.
Patty says, I'm here to listen and learn. I've heard about Cleo's work from Jill. Anyone else like to share why they're here?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Jones, and I live in Oakland. And I actually was very fortunate to attend the very first round of the 22nd century, I said change leaders, to dismantle the white supremacy mythology with Cleo and with Jill last year. And it was so profound. It changed my world and changed everything, obviously, and in very, very subtle ways. And I'm just here to support and to learn and to just be a part of the community. I found that I missed Jill and Cleo very, very much. So when I saw this pop up on my LinkedIn feed, and I was like, oh, I must attend. So very, very magical room here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's good to hear you.
I'm Richard Friesen from San Jose, California, and I'm a therapist, and I look through the lens and the model of how we create personal health. And Jill and I have had a couple of conversations, and the model and the perspective that I'm seeing is very different from mine in some ways. And I just love being challenged and stepping into other worlds to see how they look at the world and the movies they create and the beliefs, because I see the world as being created through our belief systems. And I know that I have mine, and to learn about others is really mind stretching, which I love.
Welcome, Mr. Friesen.
Richard.
Richard. Richard.
I want to ask if you don't mind to keep the conversation here as opposed to in the chat, because I know I have a hard time going back and forth. But if for some reason you want us to read out what you put in the chat, if you're not voice enabled for whatever reason, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, all good. Totally understandable. My name is Naomi Raquel Enright. I am a writer, educator, and equity practitioner, author of Strength of Soul, published in 2019 by Two Leaf Press and University of Chicago Press. And I've really loved learning about Jill's and Cleo's work through LinkedIn. And I'm excited to hear directly from Cleo today.
Nice to meet you.
Same here. Thank you.
That very much chimes with my experience, Naomi. And Patty, I heard about your work on LinkedIn and through Jill. So I was curious to see you both together and firsthand. And I work in children's services, which is social care in the UK. I'm a therapist and a clinical psychologist by background. And my work is to consult to what we call frontline practitioners, because Jill asked me about that last time, which is the social workers. And particularly I look through the lens of getting them to think about anti-oppressive practice, because actually they have a lot of power. And particularly one thing to think about cultural sensitivity.
Excellent. I have a suggestion, Jill. Because of time, I want to get started. What I'm requesting that people do is when they ask their question, introduce themselves if they haven't done that already, and then go on with their whatever their questions are. So we won't, not have enough time to actually engage the issues that brought people here. So that's fine with you. Can we go on that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. One thing I'll say before we get started is that I'm here for you. I'm here to answer questions, to engage, etc., which requires your participation and your voice. So do your best to bring your voice into the space so we can actually engage whatever concerns you or whatever you have questions about.
People already introduced, a lot of people already introduced themselves. So I want to ask if you have something that's alive for you, because we only have 40 minutes left. If you have something that feels really alive for you that you want to ask and bring into the space, let's do that now. Otherwise, let's dive into some of the things that already have been raised. Would that be okay, Cleo?
Absolutely.
Okay. Barbara.
This is alive for me. It keeps catching my ear when I hear things. You mentioned that the cohort that is starting is for white anti-racists only. And I get that. I understand the benefits of affinity groups, but I cannot help but shrink when I hear whites only, so can you address that?
Well, I'll let Jill initiate the answer to that and I'll join where it makes sense.
Okay. So this work is paradoxical and it occurs on many levels. You know, a whites only bathroom in 1946 was different from a whites only group to look at anti-racism. The very simple answer is we try to mix group, and it didn't work as well as we had hoped. Cleo can speak to, there's a lot of very specific work that needs to be done in Black communities away from white people, frankly. And sort of trying to do all this work together meant we didn't do any of it as well as we might have otherwise. That's a
Barbara, there
simple
might be
answer.
some more poetic ways of describing the same phenomena other than whites only. I understand your reaction to that, and I concur with it. And it's probably not a phraseology that I personally use, but I am a strategist. And the reason I preference my comments with that is that this thing called white supremacy methodology has had profound impact on worldview, on behavior, on perspective, on impulses. And there's work that white people in particular need to do that not only impacts them, but their families, their extended families, their community and their culture. And it needs to be done in ways that is not interrupted by other things. So we need to, talk to a wordsmith or something about a better way of phrasing it. One way that's sometimes used is for people of European descent or people who are identified as white in postmodern times. But there's white work to do. So we're here to do white work.
Thank you.
It says, in a word, focus. That's concise.
I see Jennifer's heart. Jennifer understands that she has been through one of our programs before, and she understands what we're talking about.
And Barbara, I'm wondering how that landed for you. Were you satisfied with that answer, or is there something still kind of pushing through that wants more satisfaction there?
I know I can appreciate that. And like I said, I do understand the benefits of affinity groups. Absolutely. I that makes perfect sense to me. When I hear it, and I realize I'm also getting hung up on the language, and that can be easily adjusted. But when I hear it, I immediately think, oh my gosh, that's exactly what somebody who wants to tear down this kind of work or doesn't believe in this kind of work is going to latch onto, right? And so I feel like that it does deserve careful consideration. We should really adjust the language that we're using.
Thank you.
I really, what stuck out to me was identify as white, because then you're coming to it on your own. It's how you think about yourself, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So I appreciate having that language.
Thank you. And I appreciate your suggestion, and we're still grappling with this. So, and then one more thing I want to add to it in case it isn't obvious, that the group is not going to be all white, because you might have noticed that Cleo is not white.
And I never will be. No, I mean, it's easy to laugh at that comment, but there are some Black people who work very hard on trying to be white. Trust me. Some of them are very famous, but not all of them. But we may get into that later if it's relevant. But I'm not, I love being Black. Well, let's hear from some new voices.
I have a comment that I'd like to make. This is Betty from Manassas. I wanted to just kind of chime in on the conversation we were having. Speaking from a Black perspective, I'm involved with a young lady who is having community conversations on this same subject in our community. One of the challenges that we're running into is that it's very difficult to get white people to engage these conversations. Some of my experience has been that sometimes the white people that we do engage feel intimidated having conversations with Black people, for whatever reasons that they feel that way. And so I think that one of the things that I was sat in on a conversation with Jill and Jared Carroll, I guess some months ago. And one of the things that I noticed as I came out of the conversation was that I found that white people are more comfortable having these kind of conversations with each other. It feels less threatening for them. But I do find that there's a struggle with them having one-on-one conversations with a Black person. So that may be part of the problem. why we focus on trying to have the conversations with white people, not necessarily focusing just on white people, but why the discussion needs to happen with white people in particular.
Yeah. Thank you, Betty.
I wanted to dovetail on that a little bit, Betty. Thank you. And then Naomi has her hand up. I've also found that white people, myself included, when we get with other white people to talk about this stuff, can get a little bit too comfortable and not challenge each other enough. And so I think it's going to be helpful to keep that intent focus, and also to have Cleo in the room, which is not an easy thing, I think, not always a comfortable thing for a Black person to do, for anyone to be the only one of anything, but particularly a Black person in a white supremacy mythology based culture. So I'm appreciative of that and what it takes, which I will never actually really fully know.
Naomi?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really, this touches upon sort of this dialogue and this line of questioning and conversation touches upon something very particular for me, because the language piece, I think I agree with Barbara, is crucial, because so much of the language you use actually reifies the lie of inherent difference. Inherent racial difference. And so I've intrigued by the language of people of European descent or people of African descent, in part because you can be of those descents without it necessarily showing up in your face, right? Just phenotypically, you might not look that you are, but you are. And as a person of multi-ethnic heritage, I have had a Jewish American father, and my mother's from Ecuador, and I'm brown skinned, and my biological son is presumed to be white. That's a very sort of gray space for people like me and families like mine. And so I often think of what are ways, much more intentional ways of tackling white supremacy mythology. I love that framing, while also being mindful of sort of the multiple ways that we exist in the world, and not sort of pigeonholing and believing we know who's in the room, right? I think often we assume we know who's in the room, and we might be wrong. And so that's something that I'm just intrigued by in terms of this work. And naturally, I know this is coming from a very specific vantage point, but I know that I'm not the only person who exists multi-ethnically in the world, and so it's not necessarily that unique either. So I just thought I would bring that up as well.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things I would like to do, because people come here with their lives, with their concerns, with their passions, etc., is realign the focus of this discussion, which is essential around the issue of white supremacy mythology and its impact on us in the world. So let's make sure when we ask questions, whatever, that it's centered around that issue.
Patty suggests this language: people who are racially oppressed, people who are not racially oppressed. Interesting.
What's the question?
I think that was the answer, like a suggestion about how to language the distinctions that we're making. And I would like to move on from that, if that's okay, because I know there's so many more questions in the room that I've heard come to me before this event that I would love to engage, give Cleo the opportunity to engage.
Okay, what's the questions?
Richard, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm so I'm so interested in may I refer to some of the discussions that we're having?
Sure.
You raised a question. Help me frame this if I haven't recalled it correctly, but in terms of working with Black clients, I heard you raise a concern, something along the lines of, I don't want to focus too much on racism because that's focusing on how they're disempowered. I want to give them the tools to feel fully empowered in the world. And that comes from a sort of non-racially specific set of skills and perspectives. Did I encapsulate that correctly?
Well, yeah, we're all human beings. And at the core, how do we create our identity, our beliefs, our behaviors in a way that gives us the most satisfaction and happiness in life. And so if I start with the individual, now we've all had traumas, we've all had issues, and I know that racial issues in the experience, having done a little bit of work in Chicago in daytime release schools, the growing up there, it just brings tears to my eyes to think about some of the issues that little kids had to face. So the question for me is, as an individual, how do you frame your identity, beliefs, and behaviors in a way that empowers you? And as we've discussed, and what brought me to your discussions was the anti-racism frame. When in my current model and current way of thinking, when you fight something, what you're doing is you're maintaining it. So how do we get out of the struggle about racism and give everybody the best shot in life? And how do we as human beings encourage and support each other? And I guess my concern is creating a structure that debilitates some people. I belong to Clubhouse, and there are some Black groups there, and I've dropped in and listened to them, and they're all about your beliefs, your empowerment. You can do anything, and I haven't heard one comment about racism. So it's kind of interesting to see other groups who are looking at what we can do in terms of our movies, our mental mindsets to really make a life wonderful and rich.
You said a lot. You referenced a few things. You referenced the people that you witnessed having conversations who are all Black, not referencing race, right? You talked about how when you combat racism, you're sustaining racism. Remember saying something along those lines? Okay, so I want to make sure that you know that I heard you. And you also talked about how to create space, strategies, or something along those lines for equity and balance. And the answer to all those things, it depends on the context. And in some instances, have to deduce. And what I mean by deduce is, it's not unusual to conversation or to witness a Black conversation where they don't mention race. I don't want to assume I know why these people did whatever they did because I wasn't there. But I've been around a few Black conversations. And there's a phenomena that can prevent us from talking about race called hegemony. And I'm sure you're familiar with hegemony. Right, Richard? Okay.
You're on mute.
Well,
Not
he
in this
did shake his
context,
head
yeah.
no, kind of. Okay. Well, for example, most Black people in this society live inside of a white supremacist socialization, where the implication is that Blackness is inferior to whiteness. One of the ways that Black people, in some instances, been conditioned to deal with that is to adapt and to try to have a life has not been involved in combative behavior, but going along with it to have so-called success. One of the ways to adapt and go on with it with the goal of so-called success, that's not to get quote unquote caught up in race. Now, I personally don't recommend that because we are caught up in race. And we have to find a way to navigate past its traumatization toward being. And there's a lot of casualty that results that only, in many cases, only Black people know about or understand. There's a lot of occurs among Black people resulting from not talking about race. For example, a mother called me the other day, and her daughter had been racially assaulted verbally at school. And she came home to talk to her mother crying. And her mother told me when she spoke to me that she raised her not to think about race. She raised her not to deal with race, but to be the best she can be. And I asked her, what does she have any other understanding of why she won't let her children understand race? And to make a long story long, or to make it shorter, she didn't want her child to be angry, and she didn't want her child to be upset. And part of that agenda frame called a white accommodationist agenda, because who she doesn't want her child to make angry and make it comfortable as white people. And that's a tradition in Black communities resulting from slavery, where if for example, if you watch the film The Help, anybody ever seen the film The Help? Or ever heard of the film The Help? Well, in The Help, for example, which is based on some realities, the maids worked really hard taking care of white children all day. By the time they got home, they were too exhausted to take care of their own children. And none of this stuff is based on a plan. Like, I'm sure those Black people that you heard having that conversation, not talking about race, was based on a plan not to talk about race. It's an acculturization. It's a generational normalization about, let's not address what hurts. And what I had to teach that mother was, you have to teach your child to understand racism and white supremacy, because that's a side effect of her not understanding. By default, she's gonna hurt her self-worth to be in question, because white supremacy puts the value of Black people into question on a perpetual basis. So it's important that we understand how white supremacy methodology works, and children need to understand that. But often they don't, because their parents are trying to protect them and adapt. Getting back to your concern about equity and making sure that people feel powerful, it's important, as far as I'm concerned, Richard, that you understand, to the extent that you can, what Black people go through. As you work in mental health, right?
Yeah, I'm a therapist.
Okay, well, that's pretty close to mental health. So working as a mental health scientist, as a therapist, it's important that you understand how racism and white supremacy methodology impacts people of African descent. You're not going to get that from the DSM-3, 4, or 5. I'm very familiar with the DSMs, which are used for diagnostic purposes to determine what people are in terms of a diagnosis, but they don't talk about white supremacy, racist injury to Black self-concept, trauma-informed phenomena that results from being Black in a normalized culture that implies that Black people are problematic people. So the DSM-3 misses that because it was done by subjective white people or Black people trying to keep up with whiteness and adapt. So it's important, which is not what this class is for necessarily, but that you understand that, because the more strategies you understand, or the more you understand and experience psychologically, anthropologically, experientially, and historically, the better conduit you can be for their mental health. If your perspective is simply, and I don't mean to be dismissive when I use the word simply, I'm trying to make this simpler, that let's create a better world. Let's make things more equitable. Well, that's a goal that could be accomplished, but it cannot be accomplished without a strategy to make that so. And part of that strategy from a therapeutic perspective is to understand, from a historical perspective, contemporary perspective, the experiences of Black people in relationship to white supremacy. Because you can make some people feel good the same way people feel good when they get high, but it's temporary if there's been no resolution around what is making them struggle. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, there's certainly, if you have a persistent environment that is giving you messages, oh my gosh, especially from childhood on, those messages become part of your mental movie and your structure.
Right. That's right.
So then the question becomes where, and I don't want to take all the time because I could literally do that. Where it does meaning lie? Do I create my experience, or does my experience come attached with the event from the outside? And I look at mental health and moving my clients, the ability to determine their own experience with agency. So even though there are the white racism structures and all those things coming at you, for me, mental health is to say, okay, that is out there. I determine my own experience.
I agree. And some people need to become intentionally bilingual or biconceptual to do what you're saying, because we're entrenched in whiteness. And whiteness can interrupt Black clear thinking over a whole lifetime. Not unless their therapist or somebody they're lucky to run into teaches them how to know the difference between white supremacy messaging and who they really are. And some people, unfortunately, in society, never get the opportunity, because even when people go to a therapist or go to school or watch things, it's drenched in white supremacy mythology and anti-Blackness. And some of the people here who've heard me speak, heard me mention this all the time because it's still true. It's very difficult for Black people, who are the largest media consumers and television watchers in the Western world, because there's a lot of escape interest among oppressed groups. It's almost impossible for Black on Black love story in popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can go to your television on a daily basis and find a story that's not a comedy. I'm not talking about comedies. I'm talking about a story that looks like a slice of life, that features two Black people who profoundly love each other. So these people, who are former children in many cases, who come to see you, and some who are probably current children, if that's what their age range is, are living in a world that you may not be able to fathom because you have not considered what I just said. Because the DSM-3 does not put this information in it, that Black children live in a society where they don't see each other loving each other. And simultaneously, to not seeing each other loving each other, almost all of the shows on TV are full of Black people doing crime, Black people selling drugs. There's a show that just came on TV called, remember the Fresh Bel-Air, or what was it called? The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Some of you look like you might be old enough to remember that. I see a lot of heads. Well, the new version of it has the Carlton character on drugs. He wasn't on drugs doing the original show. And the mother has a very strong multiple person sexual appetite. Now, mind you, this is all fiction, but we're trained, and it's produced in a way that gets us emotionally sucked in as if it's reality. We can't wait next week to see, the next episode, because we're caught up. But there's an intentional media agenda to keep Black people looking crazy. So even when somebody's coming to you to separate their neuroses from who they are naturally, they have to understand the road to the neuroses, to unpack it, to get to the clarity. And whoever guides them therapeutically to mental health has to understand, to some degree, how to navigate these people past the neurosis that comes out of white supremacy mythology to who they are at their core as a Black human being. And that can't be done through feel-good recommendations or people being advised to love themselves. And that's some specific work that has to be done, particularly when they've had enough clarity to seek therapy, because most people don't even do that.
Yeah, well, there's so much in what you said, and the impact as I look at people growing up and the impacts of all the things you said. And, it just rips my heart apart to think about what the trauma and the issues that people have to face, Black people with some very specific trauma. So I really understand that, and I could just cry at some of that stuff. So the question then is, what I'd be interested in is, if we were to create a model to step into a better world racially, what can we all think? What movie can we play? What can we all do that steps us from a fighting anti-racist into a world of love and acceptance, and one that I think you pointed out that's really important, without violating our culture or our individuality? In other words, trying to be white or trying to be something that we're not. So it's a really difficult question. So what are your thoughts on that?
Before you answer that, Cleo, can I say something about what Richard just said? Richard, I felt your heart in there, and I felt the grief, and I was feeling it with you. And I think that's a really important step. And I think that's part of the work that white people need to do together with other white people. Create a space for white tears, because white supremacy mythology impacts us too. And I admire you, Richard, for having the courage to feel the feelings, because I think a lot of what the behaviors that we would describe from white people as racist are a direct result of having a wall up against parts of our own humanity. Because if we took that wall down, we would feel all of the grief that you just touched into.
I think that's really important, because we keep that wall up.
Yeah.
And that wall produces anger and distrust and all sorts of things and behaviors and acting out in ways that are reprehensible.
And the fact that you can feel that, the fact that you have the capacity to feel that, I'm not suggesting we all feel all of it all at once, it would just overwhelm us. But to me, that says that you have the capacity to, over time, look at these hard truths, grieve them. And we're doing it not just for ourselves, we're doing it for all the other white people we may encounter, because as we grieve these things and become more whole, we can help other white people to do the same thing and create a world that's more safe and healing for Black and brown people.
And I agree with Cleo that it can't be just a temporary good feeling like a drug.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to say, and I want to let other people speak, and this.
Oh, you froze, Cleo, at least for me.
Say that.
Cleo, you're frozen.
Am I still frozen?
Not anymore. You thawed.
Am I unfrozen?
Yes.
Am I unfrozen now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about my connection, you all. This is a loaded comment that definitely requires some further work later, but similar to some of the things that Jill said, what I was going to say before she spoke was that, well, first of all, can you still hear me?
Yeah, a little spotty.
Is that even though white supremacy creates the facade of white people frolicking through the meadow with privilege, white supremacy is killing white people. And white people who are unresolved to be inhumane and disassociative and on a hegemonic level is really literally hurting the world. The climate issue that we're dealing.
You froze again, Cleo.
Place, let alone a world for your children, a better place. So I want to make that clear. It goes beyond and includes getting off Black people's back, if you will, and learning how to be a strategic partner to humanity. But but white people are suffering from the same things. It just looks different because of the complexion of the, for lack of a better term, of the situation. Did I get frozen again?
No.
Okay.
So we have 8 minutes left. And thank you for that. Thank you, Richard, for allowing me to pull you into the hot seat. I know, Barbara, you had a specific, I mean, actually you spoke already, but I know you had a specific question. Is there anyone else that wants to engage Cleo on something in particular? And Alfred, I think you spoke already too. Is anybody who hasn't spoken, but otherwise let's go with you, Alfred.
Can I ask
David.
a quick question? The quick question is there a past or current multicultural society you think is the best example we have so far of the kind of society that successfully blends multiple cultures together, like the kind that you would want to live in?
Can you hear me?
Just now you were frozen for a moment there though, but I can hear you now.
I'm sorry, y'all, about this frozen crap. Can you hear me still? Okay. That's a difficult question, David, because the white supremacy mythology agenda has been around for a couple of minutes or so. And it has contaminated intentionally because it's into power and control. It's contaminated almost every inch of the earth. So it's difficult to find places that are as you describe. And if they do exist, that's because white supremacy hasn't gotten to them yet. And there's no news coverage because they don't even know about them. There is a community, but the story is tragic. And it's not even the only story like this in terms of how it ends. But there was a community in Rwanda called the Hutus and the Tutsis. Anybody ever heard of the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda that are here? Well, the Hutus and the Tutsis, David, lived together, two different cultural groups that were both African, but different culturally, for thousands of years without any conflict. Then the Belgians came, and you may know something about this history. The Belgians came and found the group that was phenotypically most like it to privilege, and then created a imbalance between the groups and resentment between the groups. And people were born, lived and died over almost a century inside of this context. And then the Belgians left, and the Hutus and Rwanda and the Tutsis were at war, murdering each other. However, before the Belgians came in, they were two cultural groups who were both African that lived in harmony. And there are lots of examples like that, even in Europe and China and Asia, of people who lived among each other, and even where women were simply looked at as another part of the human possibility and were not devalued or had less access to influencing the culture just because they were women. And I'm using just because of the influence of patriarchy. But there's all kinds of things that once existed. But we're living in a time where polar bears don't have enough ice. You know, it's real. We have work to do. And the people that are in control of these systems that's leading to the lack of ice are people who are white or want to be white when they grow up. And you've seen people like that. Michael Jackson was like that. Michael Jackson has 4 lily white children. They're not half black, they're white. And then he made himself look white artificially and got some white kids and dyed the baby's hair blonde because he wanted to make sure it was perfectly white. I'm just giving you an example that you've all actually witnessed of what I'm talking about in terms of the internalized impact on a chronic level of white supremacy mythology or anti-Blackness. Naomi says that it's sad, yeah, but it's
You got frozen for a
there are all
moment.
kinds of examples. that I'm just saying there's all kinds of examples of white supremacy that everybody needs to understand, including when it comes to white audiences, how it impacts you. Because I've met white people, can you hear me? I've met white people who are lucky enough to be in touch with their heart, to be critical, have a critical analysis that escapes white supremacy engulfment, who are like, I don't want to do this. And then they turn on their families because their families don't have the revelation that they have, which ironically creates more friction. Can you hear, did I freeze again?
No, you're there.
Okay, that ironically creates more friction instead of more literacy around the resolution to white supremacy methodology behavior. Anybody ever met somebody white who wanted to be different than the other whites and separated from them and started pointing their fingers at them?
I used to be more like that.
Well, disassociation is not necessarily a transformation.
No, it's not. We had a couple more. Alfred, you wanted to say something, and Barbara, you wrote me something before it started. Do people have to, oh, there's a third question. Do we want to go a little bit over? Can people go 5 minutes, 10 minutes over? Cleo, I want to check with you first.
I'm fine. Let me look at see what my assistant has, but I'm here right now.
Right, but okay, so why don't we say we'll stay on for those who can stay for what, another 10, 15 minutes?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so Alfred.
I have to go. I have another meeting, but I really appreciate everybody, the perspective, and giving me a new sense of how to think and filter the world. So I appreciate everybody here. Thank you, Cleo. Thank you, Jill.
Richard. And
Very
David.
welcome.
There are 2 links you wanted me to put in there. Do you want to do that before people ring off?
Yeah, so if you're interested to explore the 22nd Century Leaders Program further, David's going to put in a link to apply and a link to learn more. Probably they should be reversed. And if you're on my mailing list, you can get them anyway. And I would say if you want to leave, or if you don't want to leave and you would like to be on my mailing list and you aren't already, you can put your email address in the chat and I will put you on my mailing list. Thank you. Thanks, Patty. Patty Dye is going to be interviewed, the last of the Pro-Culturators, White Anti-Racist series. I'm going to have an invitation out soon. Alfred, you had a thought for Cleo or a question?
Yes. So I wanted to share what's bubbling up for me and ask Cleo your thoughts. What I'm hearing, people coming from their unique vantage points, their models, their theories, their beliefs, assumptions, even biases, and not necessarily good or bad, but biases. And the thing that's coming up to me is I don't know that it's an either or, and I put that in the chat, to be anti-racist or to be happy. It's not. That's a paradigm I wouldn't frame or shape. They're not mutually exclusive. But I have no option to opt out. What I confront every day, what I've faced growing up, and I have to stay in the fight against racism. But I really wonder if when we pose our questions, when we frame our questions and the models that we use, if we need to maybe take a step back and integrate the other models and frameworks that you're mentioning, Cleo, and some others have used in the chat, and integrate them and really question our questions from the get-go. So that's what was bubbling up in all that's been occurring. And I don't know what your thoughts are, Cleo.
Well, I resonate with much of what you said, particularly the strategy of questioning your questions. What people need to learn is that we're trained to be very subjective. And I often alert people that their personal opinions are often socially constructed. They're not really personal opinions, they're socially constructed.
Cleo, you're frozen.
To know why they think the way they think. Well, to be the, am I still frozen?
You're here.
But yes, Alfred, to be a successful conduit to navigate people past normalized white supremacists and toxic patriarchal behavior, people have to question their questions and question everything. But get an answer. Don't just question. Get answers to your questions. Seek answers, including to how you came to be. Because people often get personal opinion mixed with socially constructed values. And it's important to know the difference between who you are and how you've been constructed.
And that's part of what we do in the program is we give you the tools. When the last program was 9 months, we shortened it this time. The first 6 months we spent with tools to be aware of ourselves and be with what arises within us. Barbara, I know that you had oh wait, Marla, you wrote something in the chat. Do you want to say it out loud or shall I read it? Joe responded.
If you'd like to go ahead and read it, that'd be great.
Sure. Cleo, in thinking about the statement you made, read, people want to see Black folks acting crazy. It also occurs to me that this presents a conundrum. We don't always want to be portrayed as the magical Negro, the passive Christian, the mammy, or other stereotypical roles where we aren't allowed to show our complexity. White people get to act all kinds of roles across the spectrum. How do we strike that balance? And then Joe said something that she liked. Yes, Marla, the danger of a single story. Black people are not a monolith. They have the full complexity of humanity, which is so not represented.
I'm reading the question because the connection is really bad over here. It's going in and out. Cleo, I'm thinking about the statement you made about movement. Well, this speaks for itself. Can you hear me? The comment speaks for itself. We don't want to be portrayed as the magical Negro or the mammy, and that we have complexity as human beings. But what my first impulse to hearing that is that, and this is not what this class is about, but this is a response to Marlo's comment. I wish Black people didn't even care or even pay attention to what white people think about Black people and how Black people are portrayed by white people, except to educate our children on that this is a phenomenon that they need to be aware of and look at it as a human corruption and do not internalize the implications of it. But not run around here feeding into white supremacy by being concerned about what white people think about Black people. Because the first thing, that's the first thing we need to do is learn to love ourselves in our own image and not be codependent to white supremacy.
And I think we're seeing a lot more of that in people creating, Black people creating the stories now.
Well,
being
when we're
more
lucky,
active, yeah.
When we're lucky, because some of those Black people, not all, but some of those Black people got the opportunity to be on TV because they were successful at appeasing white people.
Yes.
And were white enough for white approval to get on television. Hold it just a moment. I have to answer this because it's outside of my meeting time. Hi, Tremor. You have a meeting? You have a minute so I call you back, or is this an emergency?
So who else had something that they wanted to bring up to Cleo? Cleo, you're on mute.
I have about 5 minutes more.
Okay. What Cleo didn't tell you is he's running 2 organizations. He's a public figure. He often gets tapped to make public commentary. So we're really lucky to have this time, and I really appreciate that you came here, Cleo. But you can get more of him in the 22nd Century Leaders program. Anything else for Cleo before he needs to ring off? Well, Barbara had an interesting question, but she's gone now. So we can end here. And again, if you want to be on my mailing list, you can reach me on LinkedIn and give me your email, or you can put it here in the chat. And Cleo, thank you so much. I really look forward to this next round of work with you. And we've got Patty Dye coming up. I can't even remember the date now. And we might do one more of these. I'm not sure. We can squeeze it in. Anyway, thank you all. It was really nice to see you. Betty, Marla, Eileen, Alfred, Joe, and Cleo. Have a good one.
Thanks very much. Bye.
You don't go away. We stay here.
Oh, I know.
Leave.
I've been well trained.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Marla.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have all this stuff that just came up that I got to deal with. Is it possible those chats, are those chats also saved?
Yeah.
There's a lot of them, and I didn't get a chance to. They are okay, because I would like to see them later.
Okay.
Anything before I rush off?
I did so much marketing for this, like hundreds of people, and then only 11 came or something like that, and just a small number. So I was like, wow, I don't know how we get more people. That's all.
Well, I don't know, what the answer is, except for I was surprised, but also because of my schedule, pleased that it was at this time. Most events like this are not at this time of day.
Say that again. I'm not
Can you
sure
hear
what
me?
you were trying. I do, but I don't understand.
This is a difficult time. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. What time of day would be better?
It's usually, these things are done at like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I must rush. I got.
Okay.
What?
One last question. What would you think about doing? You do an interview with me about white people, like about white on white or something like that. You're frozen, so I don't know what you're thinking or saying.
I'm gonna call you.
Okay.
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 Bye.
Bye.